not just talking about our faith in the Lord. I'm talking about our faith just in general. You had faith whenever you got in your car that you'd be able to go forward when you hit the gas, be able to stop, press on that brake. You had faith that those people around you weren't. The light was red, you were going to stop. Everyone behind you was going to stop too. You had faith when it was green, the people who had it red, stop. You had faith when you opened that door earlier, walked through, that it wasn't just going to slam shut on you. You had faith when you took a step that gravity wasn't going to give up and you were just going to fly away. You had faith when you sat down in that pew that it was going to hold your weight when you sat on it. You had faith when you went to stand up from that pew that your butt wasn't going to stick to it. You had faith even this morning in allowing me to come here and preach to you. You have faith right now, and I'm not going to do that either. See, we are a people of faith, and a lot of these things, we don't really understand them, but we completely believe in them. Yet for some reason, when it comes to Scripture, when it comes to God, it seems like we don't want to have faith. It seems like we want to doubt, we want to struggle. But tonight I'm going to tell you that God deserves our faith. He's worthy of it. Now, our faith is not in something that is just unseen or unbelievable, but something we have evidence for. In Hebrews, faith is talked about just briefly. We're not going to go there, so we don't have to open there right now. But we find that faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. See, we are believing that God's going to come back, that Jesus Christ will return. Amen. We have evidence of what Jesus has done on this earth and the fact of who God has been since the beginning of time. In fact, tonight we're going to be in Genesis chapter 22. Genesis 22, you can begin to turn there. And we're going to find a story, a familiar story, I believe, where we find that faith in God, it's worth it. That He deserves it. That He's worthy of our faith. Genesis 22 is at the very beginning of our Bible, so really not too much has happened besides, creation of the world, everything we see, all that fun stuff. But then after that, there was a flood, and God destroyed everything because of mankind's sins. And in that moment, in Genesis 12 even, you think, well, God, what are you going to do? Noah's gone, Adam's gone, and God chose for Himself Abram. And He took Abram and told him, leave the land of Ur, leave the land of your fathers, go to a place I've told you. Have faith in me. And Abram, he believes, and he takes his wife Sarai, and his nephew Lot goes with him as well. They begin to sojourn. They become nomads, and they just go around in the area. And see, while Abram believed in God, his faith wasn't complete. In fact, just a few verses after God tells Abram, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless the nations through you. Well, then Abram lies. He tells his wife Sarai to lie. They go to Egypt. And Abram gets his wife Sarai and says, you're beautiful. They're going to kill me for you. Just tell them that you're my sister. Well, they do just that, but it was indeed a lie. It was sin. He did not fully believe in God. Not yet. And then we know in Genesis 16, he still doesn't have a child. He still doesn't have an heir. And God tells him, no, I promise in Genesis 15, your servant will not be your heir. He will not get your inheritance. I promise you. But Abram doesn't fully believe. His faith is not realized yet. And he goes with his Egyptian servant instead. And then even in Genesis 18, we find a similar passage. But even Sarai, now Sarah, and Abram, now Abraham, God tells him, you're going to have this child, I promise you. And Sarah laughs. I'm old. What are you talking about? Abraham's almost 100 years old. There's no way. But just as God had promised, just as He had claimed would happen, Sarah's pregnant. She gives birth to Isaac, the son of promise, the one they'd been waiting for literally 100 years for Abraham. A long, long time. And here in Genesis 22, his faith is going to be put to the test. Genesis 22, verse 1, it begins like this. And it came to pass after these things, those are all the Isaac being born, that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, behold, here I am. Now, the Bible, when it says tempt, it's not meaning in the same sense of how Satan tempts us to sin. God's not trying to get him to stumble and mess up and make mistakes. No, it's more of a testing, kind of like how school teachers gives you tests. They don't want you to fail. They just want to see, are you learning? Have you figured it out? You've been given the information. Do you actually know it? And here, that's the same thing. God's doing that with Abraham. Do you really believe me? Is your faith in me genuine? Have you truly found me worth believing? After 100 years, Abraham, do you now believe? And Abraham says, yeah, Lord, I'm right here. What do you want? Verse 2. And he, that is God, said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and give thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. So you know what God tells Abraham? Take your son Isaac, go offer him to me. Not just the sense of set him aside so that he can be my pastor, priest, nothing. No. Literally take him and put him on a burnt offering for me. God had never asked anything like that of any person at this time. But he asked this of Abraham. And I find this very interesting, just the wording, right? In verse 2, God tells him, take thy son, your only son Isaac, the one, you love him. And God is emphasizing Isaac, the child of promise, the one you've been waiting for. Give him to me. Now Abraham is left with a problem, isn't he? God said, do this. And Abraham's like, I can ignore God. I can not do it. I can just keep going about my daily life. Or I guess I can get there. And what are you going to do, Abraham? Are you going to truly offer your son, your only son, the one you love? Look at verse 3. Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. So what does Abraham do? He immediately obeys. Some people believe that this was a dream that Abraham had when God told him this. It's not strange. He had similar dreams. In Genesis 15, God appeared to him in dreams. But regardless, he wakes up early in the morning. You know why? Because when you go on journeys, at least I do when I travel, you get up early and you go. Why? Because it's just easier. Because if I wait too long in the day, I eat breakfast, and I walk the dog, and I think, maybe I'll wait till after lunch. And then I eat lunch, and I say, do I really want to go today? Maybe I'll go tomorrow. Or I'll leave at night. It's cooler at night anyway. And then I'll eat dinner, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go. Abraham, he doesn't leave room for that. He doesn't allow that to happen. Instead, he wakes up early. He gets up before he would typically even get up. Not because this was a pressing matter. He gets up and he does what he needs to. What is that? He has to get a donkey. He has to get 2 of his servants to come with him. He takes Isaac. He gets the wood. He gets everything prepared for this. And begins to go to the land of Moriah, the place where God has told him. Now this whole journey is not strange in and of itself. We believe that Abraham's offered many offerings to God before. He's sacrificed many things for God. And Isaac might have done that with him. These servants might have already done something like this with him. But never like this. Never like this at all. But Abraham, we see that he immediately does it because he believes God's worth believing. He has no idea what's about to happen. Absolutely none. He has no recollection for it. He has no Bible to test it with. He just knows God told me to do this, so I'm gonna start on my journey. Immediately I'm going to do this. So that's what he begins to do. And then we find, verse 4, then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. See, we find that when God tells us to do something, he's going to show us where we're supposed to go. He's going to show us what we're going to do. He's going to make it very clear. And I'm not talking that he's going to give a billboard or you're going to find a piece of paper and it's going to have a word and it's just going to mean, oh, well, of course, those are coincidences. Those are not what God is necessarily using. No, that's an aspirin. Yeah, no. It's definitely not what God is using. That's not how he works. We know what we're supposed to do and where we're supposed to go based off his word, based off what he tells us to do. And he tells Abraham to do this. He shows him where to go. And he goes up to that mountain. He goes to where he needs to go. Verse 5, and Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. See, Abraham, he does something else here. I find this interesting because one of his servants we know of called Eliezer, he was the one in Genesis 15 that Abraham thought, man, he's going to get my inheritance. So he was a good servant. He was a good man, a noble man. Abraham could have told him, God told me to offer Isaac. Can you do that for me? Abraham could have done that. He could have had someone else do it in his place. He could have even brought these guys with him, and the moment that they see he's raising a dagger to kill his son, that they would stop him. But Abraham said, nope, we're not going to leave any room for that. Abraham said, God told me that I have to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to allow there to be any distractions or anyone to stop me. So he leaves the servants. And him and Isaac, they just keep going. Verse 6. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. He took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. See, now Abraham, he's not even allowing there room for time in between things. He gets the fire with him. He doesn't have to wait till he gets to the mountain, then they can build the altar, then they can make a fire. He's like, no, I'm ready. I got my knife, got my fire. We're going to build this altar. I'm going to do it immediately. I'm going to do it quickly because God asked for it. I'm not going to wimp out. I'm going to do exactly what I've been told to do. And we don't know exactly what Isaac's age was, but from these next verses, we can presume that he wasn't too small. He wasn't as little as Annalise, obviously, because he was walking on his own. But he wasn't old either. He was a young boy, a young man. And because of that, well, Isaac's not dumb. He begins to look around. Dad, I think something's missing. Look at verse 7. Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, my father. And he said, here am I, my son. He said, behold the fire, and here's the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Again, we believe Isaac, he's probably done these things before. He knows what it is to offer a burnt offering to the Lord. He's seen it done. He knows you need an animal for it. We don't typically use donkeys, and Dad, we didn't pick anything up on the way. What are we going to do? And now if you would imagine with me that Abraham hears this question. Many of y'all are parents in this room. You hear your child ask you this question, and the tears just go down Abraham's face. The weight, the gravity of what God had asked him, he can feel it. And you can think with me as he says, verse 8, Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. And so they went both of them together. You can imagine just the tears, the sorrow, just Isaac, God's going to provide. Abraham had faith in this. He had no idea what was going to happen. He had no idea if he would have to actually go through this atrocious act. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I saw my little girl. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine not only being asked, but holding the knife and knowing I gotta do this to her. And here Abraham was getting ready for it. He was walking up. He could have, in any moment, just dropped it and ran away. He's an old man, so he probably couldn't have ran that fast, but he still could have done it. He could have stopped. But he believed God was going to provide something. He had no idea what it was. He had no idea if it was actually going to be killing Isaac. Maybe God would raise him from the dead. Maybe he'd give me a new son. He didn't know. But verse 9, and they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. We don't know if Isaac struggled. We don't need to know. What we know is that Abraham got him. He bound him. He put him on that altar. He had it prepared. He had it ready. Just think of Abraham in this. Oh my goodness. This is his son. And here Isaac was. He didn't say he gagged him. Isaac could have been like, Dad, what are we doing? Are we sure about this? Dad, why am I on this? Dad, why am I on the altar? What are we doing? And Abraham's just crying. He had faith. He believed that if this is what God asked for, God was worth getting it. In verse 10, and Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. He was ready. He had that knife drawn. He had his son there. He was ready to slaughter him like slaughter him like he had an animal. He was ready for it. He He didn't know what was going to happen. He had no idea, but you know what? He had faith. Hebrews 11, it tells us that by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, and accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. See, again, I don't think we fully grasp how important Isaac was to Abraham. It wasn't just his own. This was the heir. This was the person, all the wealth Abraham had, and he was a wealthy man. He had a lot of stuff. It's going to be left to Isaac. But if Isaac's dead and Abraham's old, he might randomly die, and my servant's going to get it. But God, you said that you're going to bless me. You said that my offspring, my seed, from my own loins, God, you said. But God, you said you want me to offer up my son. So Abraham gets the knife, and he's ready. He's prepared to do what no one can even imagine. He's prepared to give God everything. He believes God is worth it. He believes God is worthy of this. He's worthy of his child, the love that he has, the one and only son, the only one he could ever have even. And in that moment, right at the perfect time, verse 11, the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. You have to imagine Abraham here. He's got this knife. He's ready to do it. And as he hears the voice of God, Abraham, Abraham, and he drops the knife. Oh my gosh, God. Yes, thank you. Thank you for stopping. What is it? Please don't make me do this. Please. What does the angel say? Verse 12. He said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Here Abraham was, old man, truthfully older than most of us will ever even reach. And God said, now your faith is what it needs to be. Now you finally believe in me as you need to. Church, my hope is that we're not going to have to wait till we're 100 years old before we finally believe in God. I believe our faith can be realized and God can be counted on right here and right now. Just as God was faithful right then, he's going to be faithful now. He was faithful here to Abraham. Abraham was ready to do it. He was prepared to do the impossible. God said, no, it's okay. I see it. You've passed the test. You did what I wanted you to do. You fear me. You love me. You're actually following me. In our Bible, it took you 10 chapters. In life, it took you 100 years. Abraham, you did it. You've done it. He believed him fully. You know what God does? He offers a substitute. Look at verse 13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked and beheld behind him a ram caught in a thicket, and by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, the mount of the Lord, it shall be seen. And that's something. God had an offering, a sacrifice prepared, one that wasn't expected, one that Abraham really wasn't looking for. I mean, you can imagine the thicket had to have been close. Abraham was probably in tears on the ground, like, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord, for not letting me kill my son, but you still deserve an offering. I have nothing here to give you. And right there, it was stuck. It's almost as if God had a plan. Isn't that something that here, this one and only son, the one that was loved, he didn't die. It's a foretelling of a one and only son that did die. A famous verse, we all know it, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. See why Abraham did not have to give up his only son. He didn't have to give that up. He was at the point, but he didn't have to. There was a substitute. There was something in his stead. Well, now we flash forward to our time, and there was the sacrifice in our stead as well, in our place too. That was Jesus, the only Son of God. He willingly gave him up for us, willingly died in our place, willingly died so that we don't have to take on the wrath, just as his ram took on that for Isaac. Isn't that something here in Genesis 22? That Jesus is already foretold, the predecessors already revealed, the forerunner. And isn't that something that here Abraham calls this place Jehovah Jireh? God provides. The Lord provides. Jesus hadn't come yet for Abraham. The Bible wasn't written yet for Abraham. Moses hadn't happened. Paul hadn't happened. David didn't happen. None of these things had happened yet. But God was still faithful. He still provided. He was still there, just as he is today. And I like that too here at the end of verse 14, that it's as it is said, to this day in the mount of the Lord. This point, now for us, it's probably hidden. But for them, as Moses wrote this place, it was still there. They could still see it. They could still witness. This is where Abraham offered his son. And God said, someone else is going to die in your place. This is where we can know God provides. Things like that, they're helpful, aren't they? They're signs, those monuments for us to be able to see them and know, you're right, God is faithful. Here's testimony of that. Here's the proof of that. And isn't it nice? We have an entire Bible to give us that proof. And here we find that substitute, the better offering, isn't it? Honestly, that ram was so much better. God had never, ever asked for a child, a person, to be killed like that. And he wasn't about to then either. So he provided a better substitute, just as he does for us. Then not only is this faith in God, we find a better substitute when we believe, we also find that the faith, it's blessed. Look at verse 15. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abram out of heaven the second time. So again, Abraham and Isaac, they're still up on the mountain. They have the ram, it's burning. You already know Abraham and Isaac, they're hugging, they're crying, they're just so happy. So blessed. But the angel calls again, verse 16, and said, by myself I have sworn, saith the Lord. For because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Blessed because thou hast obeyed my voice. See, sometimes we think our faith in God that we don't get any benefit. Now, I'm not here telling you that we have faith in God because it benefits us. No, I'm not saying that at all. God deserves our faith. He's worthy of our faith. Whether he gives us anything or not, it's because of who he is that we need to have faith in him. But we do find that faith in God, it bears fruit. It does have a gain for us, a reward. That reward is not always on this earth. It's not always on this planet, and that is true. Faith in God won't necessarily make you the best salesman at your work. It won't make you the best driver. It won't make you the best employer and employee. But faith in God, it will mean that you're going to live your life accordingly, the right way. And because of that, God here says, I'm going to bless you, Abraham. And it's funny, I think, because God's already told Abraham these things. He told him all the way in Genesis 12, I'm going to bless you. Your seed is going to be throughout the world. I'm going to bless the world through you. And here 10 chapters later, the same thing, the same truth. And it's really even multiplied because here, God says, your offspring, your seed is going to be as much as the stars, as much as the sand on the seashore. That your offspring, there are going to be that many of them. They're going to be that great. They're going to be that multiplying. He was originally, of course, talking about Israel, the literal seed, but we know that becomes eventually the children of God as well, all who believe in the name of Jesus. And not only is the seed going to be great, I like the ending of verse 17, that and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. It means that this seed, your seed, this country, this people that you're going to give birth to, they're not just going to be some weak nation that's going to get rolled over. They're going to be powerful. They're going to inherit a strong kingdom, a kingdom so powerful that they're going to be at the gates of the enemy. Almost as if, just like how Christians are at war at the gates of hell. How about that? But not only is the seed going to be powerful and great in its own sense, verse 18, that your seed's going to also bless the nations of the earth. You know what that great blessing was? It wasn't just Joseph, it wasn't Moses, it wasn't anybody like that. The great blessing from Abraham's seed and Abraham's line is Jesus. And isn't that just so cool, so wonderful how God works? Genesis 22, he has a plan that won't be realized in our time until Matthew, until Mark, until Luke, until John, until Jesus comes down to this earth. But God had that plan to bless the nations. See, what we find here in Genesis 22 is It's not merely a story of Abraham's faith. That's not what this was about at all. You can replace Abraham with any figure, really. This passage is about how God is faithful. That what he says he's going to do, he's going to follow through with it. He's going to do it. We don't have to doubt that. We don't have to worry about that. And he might ask us to do crazy things. Absolutely. This is crazy. I mean, good grief. Can't really get much crazier than offering up your own child. Maybe God's going to call you to change your job, to talk to that person, to live a life just so different than the world. But do it. God deserves it. He's worthy of that faith. And when we step out on that faith, it's not blindly. And it's not the same way that, honestly, I'd step out in faith knowing that gravity is going to work. No, it's not like that. It's with evidence. It's with facts. It's with, this is the same God that Abraham has. He's faithful then. He'll be faithful now. Church, would you stand with me for a word of prayer? Dear Lord Jesus, Lord, we thank you so much for your word. Lord God, we thank you for being faithful. Lord God, even when we're not faithful, even when